Recently, I got a written message from a listener who wrote, "My husband is Serbian and speaks Serbian to our son. I speak English, but I don't speak Serbian well. Our little one is just 17 months old and very vocal. But in my expat group, parents worry their bilingual kids might be confused. How young is too young for two languages? And how old is too old for two languages?" It is such a good question, and one that so many families wonder about. In this episode, we'll look at how babies process two languages, what the benefits, milestones, red flags, and what you can do about it, all geared towards the multilingual home. If you would like to send your question, you can email me at hello@thelanguageofplay.com or click in the show notes and leave a voice message. I may just highlight your question on the show. And remember, when you have a question, it means hundreds of other listeners have the same question too. You will help many by asking it. And today, we will answer Kimberly's question. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dinalynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned, because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. Welcome back to the language of play on this blustery fall day. I don't know where you are, but we have leaves blowing everywhere. I've collected trailerfuls to bring to the compost site. Before we get started, I'd like to read a message from our sponsor, and that is Lightening Admin VA. You've got a lot on your plate: speech therapy appointments, home practice, and all the daily mom stuff. And if you run a business, that mental load can feel even heavier. That's why I want to tell you about Cindy at lightningadminva.com. She's a virtual assistant who handles the admin side of your business so you can focus on your kids and still keep your business running smoothly. See the description below this episode or email Cindy at lightningadminva.com. And folks, I want to tell you, my inbox got super deep and I called Cindy and she was amazing. She helped me figure out how to organize it differently in ways that I didn't know. It wasn't quick. I'm still digging through it, but her help has been tremendous. Now, listeners, if what we're talking about today is something you want to address on a deeper level, I can help you with that. I don't think I've ever mentioned this on the podcast before, but I will today because it is a pertinent topic. In 2015, I received my TEFL certificate from Northern Colorado University for teaching English as a foreign language. This became a side hustle for many years after my speech pathology job. The training and experience, in conjunction with speech pathology continued education and experience, gave me a deep understanding of early language development and disorder in multi-language homes. If you want to know for sure if your kid is on track, click the link in the show notes to schedule a call with me. And when you leave the conversation, you will have confidence in knowing your next best step. Even if that step means continue exactly what you're doing, you will know for sure that you are on track. This is such a wonderful and important episode topic. So thank you, Kimberly, for this question. Parents often worry, but don't get clear guidance to distinguish normal bilingual development from true developmental delays. In my work, I used to see really often that there was a belief in the town that I had worked in that if the families, they were Spanish-speaking families, and if they were to continue to teach Spanish to their kids at home, that the kids wouldn't be able to function in English in this Minnesota environment. And so in many of the families, they stopped speaking Spanish to their kids, which meant they were not talking to their kids because the parents did not speak English or they didn't speak English well. Now, the parents' concern and motivation did come out of their love for their child. They wanted to do what was best for their children, but the advice that had been passed down through the generations was not good for kids. This is a great and important question because many families all over the world are dealing with questions that relate to the dual language learning experience. And more than anything, we really do want to help our kiddos to reach their potential. Let's get started by me reading this email again to you to refresh your memory. Kimberly writes, I've been meaning to reach out to you. Quick question. Do you have experience with young toddlers whose parents speak separate languages? My husband is Serbian and speaks Serbian to our son. I speak English to him and do not speak Serbian well. We're not truly concerned at this point, as he is just 17 months and is quite vocal. I just wanted to ask, as I'm also concerned in an expat community of women who I see sharing the same concerns. Some of their kids are older as well. So I guess my real question is, how young is too young for kids to be processing two languages? How old is too old? The short answer is that no age is too young for a child to process two languages. Infants are built to learn more than one language. And while achieving a completely native accent in a new language becomes harder with age, you can still successfully learn additional languages at any age. It's just easier when you're younger. You're doing just fine. A 17-month-old who's vocal and hearing both parents speak is in a great place. The research shows that early bilingual exposure does not confuse children. And it shows infants are biologically prepared to learn multiple languages and can discriminate and learn the sounds of two languages from a very early age. Infants exposed to two languages develop separate phonetic and lexical systems, and that means phonetic is your sound system and lexical is your vocabulary. And so these two statements are right out of the research. Now, let's talk about some of the benefits of having two languages. And then we'll talk about some of the milestones that are typical in bilingual language development. After that, I will draw up the red flags for you so you will know exactly what are those red flags to be watching for. And of course, what we always do here at the Language of Play is help you parents know what you can do at home. So that's it. That is today's outline. First, the benefits. So before you throw in the hat on raising kids with more than one language, because yes, it's hard, let's talk about the cognitive advantages that come from growing up in a multilingual environment. And the research is super strong. The first thing I'll mention is something called cognitive flexibility. When children learn multiple languages, they have to become flexible. And this is because they're continuously deciding which language do I use in this particular context. They will be jumping back and forth with their attention and switching tasks in their mind. Their working memory has to hold on and manipulate the information that they have in their head. Other words for this kind of thing is executive function, mental management system, cognitive control, This is all something that gets strengthened because the brain is constantly managing multiple language systems and constantly deciding which language to use. Another benefit of two languages is that kids learning two languages tend to notice patterns and similarities across languages. That means that their reasoning skills get practiced more. The abstract and concrete reasoning get exercised, and this results in multilingual children often performing better when they have to come up with multiple solutions to a problem. And this is because their brain has been doing that task regularly. Another benefit is that multiple languages makes the children more aware of how language works. They understand that language has structures. They understand that reading, grammar, and writing skills are different in the different languages. The word for this we use is called metalinguistic awareness. The next benefit is that kids with more than one language tend to build their auditory discrimination skills. And what that means is how well they're able to tell one sound from another, which affects how well they're able to listen to musical rhythms, tone. And although this does not mean that your child is naturally musically talented, what it does mean is that they are sensitive to sound patterns. And this overlaps with the skills that are needed in music for pitch, rhythm, and tone. This is quite similar to the skills needed for math and logical thinking. Learning multiple languages can support abstract thinking and pattern recognition, which of course are your foundations in math, because we're using a number to represent a concept, and then we have to manipulate the number and do abstract procedures to get a result. Again, it does not mean that your child is going to be naturally talented in math. It does mean that the skills your child needs to develop to grow up in a bilingual or multilingual experience supports the same skills that they need in math. And finally, the last benefit I'm going to mention is social and emotional skills. When kids grow up in a multilingual situation, they tend to develop better empathy and perspective taking. When kids are required to switch languages, they start to understand that different people have different linguistic and cultural ways of thinking about the world. It naturally lends itself to help kids realize that everybody has different perspectives. Now, these benefits are most evident if the kids start learning the languages naturally from a very early age, and taking a few lessons later in life doesn't produce the same cognitive impact. And the degree of this advantage also depends on the quality of the exposure that your child is getting to each language, how much they practice, and the context where they can actually apply that practice and learning. Just hearing languages now and again isn't enough. It needs to be an immersion experience in order to have all these wonderful benefits. But having mentioned all these benefits, I hope you are fully swayed that don't stop when you have this beautiful gift available to your kids. In summary, the benefits I mentioned today are focus, flexibility, memory, how language works, pattern recognition, problem solving, auditory discrimination, and perspective taking. So if you have a situation where you can provide the solid second or more languages to your child, I fully encourage you to do it. Now let's talk about what is typical in bilingual language development. We'll start young and talk about the milestones. It seems logical to say it, but I still will. Who the child speaks to will influence which language the child uses most often. Children will default to the dominant language they are exposed to, and typically that is the caregiver's language. Silent periods or observation periods are super common because kids listen longer and they sort out which word belongs to which language. This silent period isn't something to stress over. but it is something to watch. Mixing languages does not mean the child is mixing up the languages. Mixing languages we're going to refer to as code switching, like the code for English is different than the code for Arabic. It doesn't mean that the child is confused because they are code switching. And what code switching looks like is I'm saying a sentence in English and I insert an Arabic word in there, maybe a Spanish word, whatever that other language is. That does not represent confusion. It actually represents adaptation. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. So right now, let's talk about the milestones. The milestones are very similar, and there are some important differences in timing and how vocabulary is distributed and how languages mix. Now, at 6 months, monolingual kids will babble sounds that match their native language, but bilingual kids babble sounds from both languages. The type of babbling that is done is the same, no matter whether you are learning one language or two. And if you would like more details on babbling, there's an episode on babbling, and that would be episode 224. First words still come around 12 months. The monolingual child usually has about 50 words by 18 months. Bilingual kids, however, have their vocabulary distributed between the languages that they speak. So the first words may appear at the similar age, but when they are split across the languages, sometimes it doesn't seem like they have as many words. It is very normal if your bilingual child knows about 20 words in English and about 20 words in Spanish, but it seems delayed in either language. The total vocabulary is what you need to look at, and that matches monolingual children. In the area of vocabulary, monolingual kids' vocabulary grows rapidly from that 12 to 24 months, and they go from having just a few words to over 200 words by age 2. And this is where it's actually different for bilingual children. The vocabulary in each language may be smaller than their monolingual peers, but the total vocabulary is about the same. We mentioned that already. But here's what's different. They often have conceptual vocabulary. That would be concept words that represent a whole. They often have more of those words. That would be words that show quantity or description in some way, such as more and big or heavy or cold. Those words that describe a concept are typically greater in kids that grow up with more than one language. And this is where code switching comes in. It is very normal when children mix the languages within the same sentence. And this is why you call it adaptation. When you take what you've learned so far and consider that your child is throwing a word in that they do know in the middle of a sentence that they do know, they are adapting to the situation with that cognitive flexibility. That is not a sign of confusion. That is a sign of adaptation. Now let's go on and start talking about word combinations to make sentences. In about 18 to 24 months, monolingual kids are going to naturally be combining two-word sentences often. Bilingual kids achieve this milestone at the same age, but their combinations of words might come from either language. This shows their intelligence in grabbing what they know. It is not to be interpreted as confusion. Next, let's look at grammar development. Now let's look at grammar development. Between the ages of 2 and 3, monolingual kids begin using correct plurals, correct tenses, and correct sentence structures. Bilingual kids, they do the same thing, but their grammar is simpler in each language at first, but it is correct. Even when it's simpler, what they are doing is correct. It is important to note that over time, that each language develops their own age-appropriate grammar, and they're often slightly behind their monolingual norms in each individual language, but not in the total language ability. So if you remember earlier on in this series, I talked about testing for kiddos that were having delays. When we look at a child with a bilingual situation, we look at the total language ability to determine, is it a delay or disorder, or is it just that their language ability is fine, they are just behind in each language, but in total, they're doing fine. And the final milestone we're going to look at is the complexity of the sentences your children are making. With monolingual kids, full sentences, storytelling, and good basic conversational skills, they are evident and emerging and growing all the time in that 3 to 5 years. Bilingual kids, about the age of 4 to 5, they're usually catching up fully in both languages. That is, if they have had a regular and rich exposure to both languages. I can't highlight enough this second part of the sentence. If your children have had regular, rich exposure to both languages, then at that time they tend to catch up in both languages about the age of 4 and 5. It is also normal that your children prefer one language, particularly in a certain context. So if at home they typically speak Romanian, then they prefer Romanian at home. In summary, we're going to say that children learning 2 languages early, they hit the same milestones as monolinguals, but they distribute those skills across 2 systems. What looks like a delay in one language isn't necessarily a true delay, because overall language and cognitive development are typically on track or even enhanced. Now let's look at delays. And this episode is getting longer than I expected. I trust you're learning a lot. Know that monolingual exposure does not cause a true developmental delay, though it may make one language appear weaker, especially temporarily. If a child has a speech or language delay, then it will typically show up in both languages, even if one language is used more frequently. So let's look at each piece of a delay or disorder. Let's start with speech, or the other word for that is articulation. We're going to define that as difficulty producing sounds correctly for their age. The big red flags that you're going to look for is at 2 years old, the child rarely uses consonants, particularly the consonants of mama, daddy, baby, or the child just sounds very unclear. It is a red flag if at 3, most of the child's speech is difficult for an unfamiliar adult to understand. The speech is slow to develop across all languages, not just the one most used at home. It is normal for bilingual children to have a slightly smaller set of sounds in each language, but they catch up. A real delay affects all languages. Now let's consider a vocabulary type of delay, and we're going to define that as a limited number of words or the difficulty learning new words, especially those words that you feel as a mom and dad that they should have been exposed to and ought to understand by now. Big red flag examples would be these. By 18 months, the child has fewer than 50 total words across all languages. By 2, the child has difficulty combining words like more juice in any language. Or if your child struggles to understand simple instructions in any language, such as bring me the ball. It's important to remember that some words exist in one language that don't exist in another language, and that is normal. But if the total conceptual vocabulary is low, that signals a delay. Third, let's look at grammar and sentence structure types of delays. We're going to define that as difficulty forming sentences or using the correct grammar. Examples of big red flags in this area would be, at 3, a child rarely combines words into meaningful sentences, or omits basic grammatical markers like plurals or tense, and they do it in both languages. Or your child cannot retell simple stories or answer basic questions. If you are starting to get concerned, don't worry. In the show notes are other episodes that are going to bring you to the specific skills that you can teach, but we will get to that. Next, we're going to look at the red flags in comprehension. So what does a delay look like in comprehension? We're going to define that as difficulty understanding spoken language. A big red flag would be that your child does not follow simple 1 to 2 step instructions. For example, pick up the toy and give it to me. Your child struggles to understand questions or directions in any language, even if it is exposed regularly. And another one would be your child appears lost in the conversation regardless of the language that is spoken to them. And finally, we're going to mention social communication delays. That I'm going to define as trouble using language socially or appropriately in the context. You can tell I took time to write out my definitions here so that we could be really clear. My examples for that would be that your child rarely initiates conversation or responds to others. Or your child has difficulty taking turns in conversation. Or they have a limited use of gestures, pointing, eye contact to communicate their needs. Remember that some code switching is normal, but a persistent difficulty in socially using languages might indicate a delay. So in the summary of our red flags section of this episode, true delays are seen across all languages. Temporary differences can happen in vocabulary or in grammar within each language, and that is normal. The red flags are limited words, unclear speech, poor comprehension, minimal social communication, and these are in any language, by the age milestones that I just said. Now, while I was preparing this episode, I made myself a chart that I can read off of, and I think it would be useful for people to have. It's not in very good form yet, but I will create it into good form if at least one person asks me for it. So, if you want that, I will email it to you, but ask me for it. So email me at hello@thelanguageofplay.com and say milestones and red flags graph or chart or something like that. And I'll know what you mean, and I'll clean it up, and then everybody that wants it will have it. No episode is complete if I don't tell you what you can do at home to help your kiddo grow in these areas. So here it is. First, I want you to maximize the quality of each language that you expose your child to. You're going to have a rich environment of quality language often. We all know that early intervention is best. And everything you do is early intervention because you're at the early stage in their life. Being strategic is going to help you be successful. So isolate the area that you notice that your child needs some help in and be strategic in giving your child good examples and many repetitions in the area where you notice that they need more practice. Here is a tip. Designate a context for each language. And here's 2 examples. First one, parent 1 speaks language A consistently, and the other parent speaks language B consistently. And that would be the situation for our listener because Kimberly speaks English and her husband speaks Serbian, and they both know those languages perfectly. So that would be the best way to expose their children in that environment. Another way to do it would be that you're going to use language A at home and language B outside of the home. The situation for that is, let's say both parents speak the same languages. At home, they're going to speak the language that you want your child to learn, but language B is going to be English because they're going into the schools and everybody's speaking English there. But at home, you're going to keep your native language that you want your child to speak also. And that way you have a context where good French is used in the home and good English is used outside of the home, therefore giving the child good examples of each language. This is a great other strategy if the parents both know French to use at home and both know English to use outside the home. When you consistently use the contexts like that, it helps your child to separate and strengthen each language. It helps them decipher the languages. Daily exposure is super important. Even if it's short, like 15 to 30 minutes per language, it's still every day and frequent within the day as much as possible. And also, use natural, meaningful conversations. Talk about your daily routines, what you did, what you will do, how you felt about it, what the objects are you're using, what events happened, what you are going to do next. This is important so your child sees how the vocabulary words are used in a sentence and how meanings change based on the sentence. It's much better than doing isolated words. All of that was a way to maximize the exposure in both languages, keeping a rich environment. The other examples are going to be shorter. And the next one is encouraging interaction, not just listening, because children will learn best when they actively use the language, not just listen to you. So this means you ask open-ended questions so that they are in a situation to answer in full sentences. Phrases like, "tell me more," is much more powerful than, "what is that?" Use games and pretend play and storytelling to make both languages fun and encourage siblings and peers to speak each language with them. The third thing is read, sing, rhyme, and play in both languages. And that would include reading books aloud daily, conversing about the story instead of just asking questions or telling and retelling the story, but actually converse about it. Songs and finger plays and rhymes help our kids with that discrimination of sounds, using movement which anchors in memory for the vocabulary and supports rhythm and tone. You can also make a game out of putting labels on the different objects in your house, whether that is written for older children or if it's using your words to continuously label objects and to narrate your daily activities. The fourth thing that is really powerful for you to do at home is actually an elimination, and that is to avoid the pressure, avoid perfection. Expect the code switching where they insert one word from one language into the sentence of another. It is normal and it shows the cognitive flexibility. You can call attention to it, but seldom. And if you do, it has to be fun. It has to be enjoyable. And your focus always needs to be on that connection you're building with your child rather than the error that they're making. This helps them be brave. 5, you can track the progress across both languages. You won't have to do it all their lives, but in the 0 to 5, it is very helpful for you to feel more calm and to feel more directed if you actually track their progress. You can keep a little diary of the words that they've used, the phrases that they know, the comprehension that they seem to have. Then you can compare total vocabulary and the sentence complexity across the languages and not just look at one. This will also help you to look for the red flags. Do they have poor comprehension even though their speech might be clear? Do they have limited words in both languages? If you start to track progress, you will have everything you need to either make the decision for yourself that they are or are not okay, or you can just give your tracking to a speech pathologist like me or somebody else to help you determine whether they are on track or not. The sixth thing for families that you can do at home is to encourage social use of both languages. So organize play dates or little classes where your kiddos are able to talk with other children using their language skills. Maybe you even have relatives that you can contact on Zoom and they can speak a different language on Zoom, so your child has an opportunity that way. The seventh thing is enriching your child's vocabulary. We talked about that in the games above because making it fun is critically important. But I state it again here so that you remember your motive is enriching the vocabulary. Their motive is having fun. So labeling objects, describing actions and feelings and events, introducing new words in context and in a different context too. And lastly, if you feel you need to seek some professional input, do it. Early intervention absolutely works best. And everything you do is early intervention when our kids are little. Being strategic will help your child be successful, and your strategy is what I just talked about that you can do as you target specific areas. Remember that when there's a delay, it is persistent across both languages. And if you are already doing many of these things and you're not finding the success you want, communicate as early as possible with a speech pathologist. Professionals familiar with multilingual development can distinguish between typical bilingual variations and the true delays. So now the summary of this last part, what you can do: regular, meaningful exposure in both languages and have a rich language environment. Talk, read, play, sing, rhyme. Track development across languages, not just individually. Normalize the code switching. Don't sweat that. And focus on communication and connection. And then an early evaluation, if delays appear in both languages, will help your child to get the intervention really early. Because we all know the earlier intervention is done, the greater and easier the success. Whew, that was a longer episode than I think I have ever done. And now I shall summarize the whole. Raising a child in a dual language home is one of the greatest gifts that you can give them, a gift that goes far beyond words. You are helping your child develop cognitive flexibility, creativity, problem-solving skills, cultural awareness, and all of that benefits them for a lifetime. It's completely normal for bilingual children to mix their languages and have different vocabularies in each language, or progress slightly at different paces. These are not signs of confusion. They are signs of a brain working beautifully to adapt and manage the two worlds of a language. Every conversation, every story, every song, playtime in either language is building a strong foundation. Consistency, patience, and rich interaction are what matter the most. And you are already doing that just by being thoughtful and intentional and here learning. And if you've ever wondered whether your child is on track, or if you want personalized guidance to help your child thrive in both languages, I want to hear from you. Let's talk together and make sure your child's language journey is strong, confident, and full of possibility. So reach out today. Your child's bilingual potential deserves the right support, and I can help you make that happen. You are doing something remarkable by giving your child two cultures, two worlds, through two languages. Be brave and keep on so your child can thrive in both. And remember, I'm always cheering you on. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review, and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.